Welcome back, everybody, to the dojo. Come on in, take off your shoes, and take a seat on the mat. I have a real special guest with us today, and his name's Ryan Snow. And I stumbled upon Ryan's Instagram profile, and I mean, you can see he's got some pretty amazing bucks down, and that piqued my interest. And as I started to talk to him, his story really piqued my interest, and I can't wait to get into that. Ryan, man, welcome. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
So, why don't you give us a little snapshot of who you are, where you're from, and how long you've been hunting?
Okay. My name is Ryan Snow. I am from the upstate of South Carolina, a small town outside of Greenville. And I hunted as a child from ages 11 through 14, and then completely quit hunting altogether and started hunting again in 2020. So, really, in my opinion, I have 4 seasons under my belt.
Yeah, which for those of you just listening, you're going to have to go over either and check this out on YouTube or go look at his Instagram account. He's sitting with four very impressive bucks behind him. Three of those taken since 2020. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, man. So where, first of all, we'll get out of the way, and I'll probably ask you again at the end. But where can they find you on your social media? You can share whatever you want.
I'm on Facebook, just Ryan Snow, and Instagram. It's just my last name with an extra W. So it's Snow with an extra W underscore Ryan, and I'm on Instagram or Facebook. That's the only two platforms I have.
All right, cool, cool. Yeah, I suggest you go check it out. He's got some pretty cool stuff on there. Um, so you said that you were hunting, for a couple years while you're younger, um, and then you dropped it. Was there a reason why you dropped it? Just wasn't feeling it at 14?
Um, so I started driving. So that's
Okay.
what was it. Got a car. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't have any relatives that hunted. My dad didn't hunt. My grandpa didn't hunt. I had one cousin that hunted, and that's the only person I could put my hands on that knowed or did any kind of hunting whatsoever. And I was just like, hey, Dad, I want to start hunting. So at age 11, I just was going in the backyard. Dad's got a small 40 acres and was just sitting on a property line pretty much, just overlooking some soybeans and a small little acorn patch and just kind of hung out there. But soon as the cars hit, man, deers and everything else in my life pretty much left and cars took over.
Yeah, yeah. So we have somewhat of a similar background. So I did the same thing. Like I hunted for a couple years. Nobody in my family hunted, and then I walked away from it. And then I got into it in my 20s, my young 20s. So I came back to it another date. But yeah, cars are a big thing. I mean, I did notice that on your Instagram. You got some pretty cool looking vehicles up there. Is that something you work on quite a bit?
Um, I'm I'm trying to give it up. So the hunting has taken over that, and that was good and needed in my life. From age, um, you know, from right around 21 to that 26 mark is kind of where I got heavy into cars. Got a small shop. Was doing my own mechanic work, fooling with race cars and a couple other things. And I was in a place where I just young, just young and
Hmm.
wild, and cars, girls, and bars was the only thing in my mind during that point in time. And I started. My family's always been involved in church, and I just, felt the Lord kind of drawing me near, and um, I went and I got saved, rededicated my life, and was like, how do I move forward? I knew that I could not continue on the way I was. I was just around the wrong group of people with cars. It led me to do a bunch of other stuff, and was honestly stressed from cars as well. Cars is a big money thing. That's one thing that I really like about hunting. It's more of work, and especially when you get in the public land, it's more of an effort. And at the end of the day, once you get to a certain age, you pull up at the drag strip or the car show, and it's who's ever got the most money is the most important, and it's kind of hard to beat that. So yeah, just and the hunting was honestly I feel like something that the Lord had laid on me. I was completely lost. I was like, where do I go? What do I do? And I remember I was on second shift, and I was like, well, I used to hunt when I was a kid. I was like, maybe I can try that. And because at this point, I was kind of pushing myself away from the places I didn't need to be and the people I didn't need to be around. And I sat down in the woods, and I was like, man, this is boring. I was like, I don't know. I'm used to the, cars revving, people around me drinking and just some loud music and everything. I'm sitting there, and I was overlooking a swamp bottom, and a small little basket rack eight come creeping across, and my skin like it jumped out of me. I started shaking. I got buck fever. I put him down and was like, "This is why I done this as a kid." And it just that was kind of the hook, and then it continued really on in that first year, and it hooked me hard, and it was almost like once I harvested that buck, I was like, okay, this is the Lord putting something back into my life that I got rid of the other things I didn't need, and this is where I'm going to go moving forward.
Man, I appreciate you just being bold with your story. So I'm a faith guy too. And it's just pretty awesome that God redirected you and pointed you into hunting. There's a lot to unpack there with what you were saying. So so when you come into hunting, it's I mean, I don't know if you know this, but it's not normal to lay down monsters like you have in the first couple of years without having anybody like mentoring you or like having a whole lot of history. So I'm assuming you're kind of an all-in kind of guy because I'm looking at your Instagram post and everything you do looks like you do it with excellence. It looks like you're doing some truck camping. So am I assuming that you're going out of state then?
Everything from this point on will be out of state.
Okay. All right. Um, so you're traveling out of state. I have a truck set up as well, and I was pretty proud of mine until I seen yours. That thing looks pretty amazing, man. I'm really impressed. And actually, when we get off air, I'm gonna ask you a couple pointers because I've got some questions. But so
Oh yeah.
you're going out of state. You're set up. You're shooting. Are you shooting a Matthews?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
I shot so my first boat ever was the V327,
Yep. That's what I
and
got.
I shot that for the first three seasons, and then the last season I upgraded to the Phase 4 29, and then 3 days ago I bought the Phase 4 33 as a backup bow because I realized when I'm 8 to 14 hours away, I'm like, man, if something happens, this could ruin my hunt, So I kind of needed a backup bow, but also I'm going to try to do more 3D shoots this summer, and some 3Ds. And I've been shooting an indoor league and I've never done that before. And so I'm just trying to keep the bow in my hands all year long. The past three seasons I haven't. I've kind of hung it up, and then right before season started, I would just make sure my 30's on, shoot into my buck in the backyard at 30 a lot, and then take off in the woods and go hunting. And I'm just trying to get more familiar with it and keep it in my hands, because I have to remind myself too, even though um, probably 5 bucks and 9 does have died in the last 4 years to that bow, that um, I've only been doing it for 4 years, so I'm trying to always keep myself familiar with it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. It's funny you said something earlier. You were like the cost. It was one of the kind of like a benefit for you coming over to hunting, and I think a lot of us would say, man, we spend a lot of money in hunting, and it's probably just compared to working on cars. But you said something that I think is really important to highlight. Is you were like essentially what I'm gonna paraphrase you a little bit and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're like it's more about the effort that you put in, and that's going to dictate the result. I think what I've even been guilty of plenty of times, especially when I first came into hunting, is that I would obsess about the gear. I would obsess about these things that really in the end it didn't really get me a whole lot closer to killing animals. It was the hard work and the skill development is what actually did it for me. But I think a lot of guys, especially when they first come in the industry, and a lot of or the industry when they first get into hunting, and I think a lot of guys even for a long time stay that way as they focus on the gadgets and stuff like that. Tell me, why didn't that happen with you when you first came in? Because it's so easy because all that stuff's right in front of our face all the time.
So I did for a little bit, um, and I would consider myself a perfectionist and a minimalist together.
Hmm.
And kind of what that means to me is um, I will fight or search forever until I find something that works. Once I find something that works, I don't look anymore. And that's been important to me. Like you can go down a rabbit hole as far as you want to, in my opinion. But once I find the stand, once I find the harness and I love it, then I don't look for anything else because that's not going to benefit me anymore after that. Now, with me only being doing this for 4 years, there was a lot of gear, but I would consider, and my job has a big part of this. I work in development and so prototype engineering and development. So we fail fast and we move forward. And that's what my boss and everybody's always ingrained in me. And we have a big budget. So at work, I might order $10,000 worth of parts, and if it doesn't work, I'll throw it all in the trash tomorrow, start over. And so that's kind of been ingrained in me. Like when I first started, I ordered every single piece that Tethered had, didn't like it. 3 or 4 weeks later, it's on Marketplace for sale, finding something else. So I went through it, but once I find it, then I lock into it and I key into it, and then I just practice with that gear and I make it an extension of myself, and I really learn it and really get it dialed in. But if I love my stand, I'm not just scrolling like, oh, I wonder what's out there, I wonder what's better, or wonder what this guy's using that killed the deer last year. And I see that trending a lot. I see a lot of people that, you know, are good hunters and they may not be successful for 1 or 2 years, and then no one pays them attention for a little bit, and then somebody comes on and kills a good deer, and then everybody wants to buy what they have.
Hmm.
And if I like something, it's mine and I'm sticking with it and I'm riding it out.
Man, that's awesome. I really like that mentality. So what is your setup right now?
Okay, so I ended up with a .5 from Lone Wolf Custom Gear, and I run a. I don't know if it's the safest thing in the world, and I don't know if you should say, hey, you should run it, but I love the Dryad. It's the Immunity belt,
Yep.
and I just run the belt. But
Hmm.
I take a bridge, an Amsteel bridge, and I loop it in the front of the Immunity belt, and I run it around my body and then loop it back. And then my tether, I just clip into it like a halo, and I
Yep.
stand right up next to the tree, and it just kind of, you know, I have jumped out of the tree in the backyard to see what would happen, and you're gonna get some scrapes and you're gonna get some, burns. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world if you fall, but to me, it gave me what I was looking for. I couldn't get used to the bridge being in my way with a saddle. I didn't really like being tied to facing the tree, but with the .5, I face a tree all the time. I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, I saddle hunt because I like to face a tree. I face a tree with my lock on all the time, and in fact, I love putting my shoulder up against a tree and kind of standing on those prime times. I love standing. I feel like I'm right there close to my bow. It takes something out. And I probably won't be able to do that forever, but right now at my age, and I'm so gun ho that I don't mind standing for 4 and 5 hours at a time. So,
I'm I'm an
and
old man. I stand too.
my sticks are the doubles,
Yep.
and I make my own cable laders. I make lifting fixtures all the time at work, so we have cable crimps and stuff like that. So I made them 24 inches. I did make cable laders 24 inches so I can run 3 sticks, and the 24-inch aider really did eliminate that fourth stick for me. So the 3 and the .5 has been my go-to. I was scared of the points at first, the bolts, rather than the V bracket, because the sticks I had before were V brackets. But once I've ran them for 2 seasons now, and in my opinion, they bite harder than the V bracket does.
Yeah, I hear that quite a bit actually. Yeah, that sounds like an awesome setup. I got a buddy of mine that has like the same setup that you're using, and he's a straight killer too, and he loves it. And actually, that he talked me into it. Well, I don't know if he talked me into it. I just watched him and thought, man, that looks kind of nice. So I went out and got a .5 this year. I hunted a saddle for 16 years and almost did 90% in the .5 this year. So yeah, I love standing too. And I'm old, man. I'm 46 years old and I still stand for 4 or 5 hours. So yeah, you'll be good, man, for sure.
And I feel like my body is just the silhouette is I feel a lot more comfortable when I'm just standing right up against the tree. I remember trying to learn the saddle, and like I said, this is all on my own. No mentors, nothing. And I buy all the saddle gear, and then I go in the tree for the first time, and then I'm facing a bunch of limbs, and I'm like, well, I should just be back in my climber. I'm looking for a telephone pole because I got all these limbs in my way. And I was like, well, if I had a stand, I could turn around and face the other way and kind of use my limbs for cover. But one thing is the saddle was really comfortable and that
Hmm.
surprised me. I thought it wasn't going to be, and I thought that was something I was going to give up, but I ended up hanging on to a saddle and running a hybrid for a while because of the comfort. I ended up stepping down to a TX5 minimalist and I ran
Hmm.
that for a while with the hybrid. And for somebody that likes a hybrid, that treated me well.
Nice, man. Nice. So walk me into, so when did, so you started hunting again in 2020. Did you kill that year?
Yep, three
Okay.
bucks.
$3.
Yeah, it's three
Okay.
bucks and a doe. Um,
Walk me through some of that, man. Like, how did you get to the point where you were able to start killing deer, and where did you kill them? I mean,
okay.
you don't have to say the exact spot, but were you on private?
Yeah,
Were you
yeah,
on
yeah.
public?
So the first year was all on private.
Okay.
Um, I My uncle is pretty much the only person I know that had some hunting land, and it's he kind of holds around 250 acres in an area that's developed everywhere around it, and so it kind of pushes the deer in that area. Um, a lot of does, and that's what I didn't understand when I started talking to other people because if I didn't see 15 does when I was hunting, something was wrong. But the bucks were very few and far between. Um, it was you could always see does, but the bucks were, and they're just not getting the age class either. They're getting smashed by cars, and they're just not in the area. But anyway, I kind of started walked in the woods, had no idea. When I was a kid, my dad bought me a two-man ladder stand for making A's and B's. And honestly, that's all I knew. I went to Cabela's, I bought a two-man ladder stand. I carried it in the woods. I didn't even have a pool or nothing. I carried it over a mile in the woods in the box and then was like, well, I'll just put it together when I get back there. And almost just quit right then, but got it up, got it together, and I was on second shift. So I didn't know what to do, but I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I would walk in the woods and I would start hunting and I would sit there till 1 o'clock every day. And I was just looking around in the same exact spot. And then I saw that basket rat come through. I killed him and I kind of got hooked. And then so I killed him earlier in the season. I want to say like beginning of October. And so then I started noticing some rut activity and I started seeing some does come by and a few buck casing and stuff like that, getting on into the end of October, early of November. And man, I just kept sitting every day. And a nice buck walked out. Not this one, but this one right here. He came out and he was chasing a doe and I whistled at him and stopped him and shot him. And so then I'm telling my cousin and my uncle and my other friends, and they're like, "Man, that's a really nice deer for around here. Like that's pushing 120-inch buck. That's pretty good." And I was like, and once I put my hands on those horns, like the basket rack was a cool feeling, but once I put my hands on those horns, it wasn't like it's weird because it wasn't a satisfied, but it's like I want to do this again and again and again and again. And so at this point, it's hard to believe looking back now. At this point, I didn't even know what a trail camera was. I didn't know anything, but the second buck got me hooked. And then so I was like, well, I got to move because I feel like I wore out the spot. And I just looked online, got me an API climber, had no idea. Carried the climber in about 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, this sucks. I was like, there has to be a better way. There has to be something. And so that's what kind of pushed me to start digging through the mobile hunter forums and, finding out about that kind of stuff. And then the second buck was beside of him was the same year, like not too
Wow.
long after that, complete other side of the property. And my friend at work, I went to him. It's like, hey man, I'm starting to hunt. And he was like, man, get you some corn, get you a big rubber glove, put it on up to your elbow and just scatter it all through the woods. And I like thinking like how far I've progressed. 4 years ago, I asked somebody, does deer eat corn?
Yeah,
And he was
yeah.
like, yeah, yeah. He was like, they will put it out. And and how dumb I was back then. I remember putting corn out, getting in the climber, climbing 5 yards from the corn pile with a 270 and just staring at it. And like looking back now, I was like, wow, like that's crazy. But um, and then I learned that the buck never would come to the corn. I would see does all the time and then would not see any bucks. And so then I positioned myself over near a cutover, and
Yep.
I watched coyotes run him out of a cutover. They circled around me. They tore off in the cutover, three of them, and I heard some commotion. And then I heard it, kind of settle down. And I looked, and he was coming out of that cutover, slipping away from him. And so that was just, in my opinion, that kind of showed me. I was like, man, anything can happen. I didn't successfully plan. I didn't, go in here and, have all my ducks in a row and kill this deer. I was just sitting here. I put time in the stand, and literally coyotes kicked him up out of a cutover, and he came out about 90 yards in front of me, and I killed him. After that was, I wanted to push myself even farther. So I went home, put the gun up, went to a bow shop, said, hey, I want to start bow hunting. Give me what you got, and bought a Matthews, and then went right back in the woods, and then hunted until I got a doe at the end of the year with my bow. And then once I killed the first doe, I was like, this is just like, you know, stacking up even higher. And I was like, all right, this feeling went from loving the horns to just seeing a deer. Now I've harvested one with a bow, and this is where I want to progress from here on out. So that was kind of the first year, and kind of how it went kind of quickly.
Yeah, that's quickly is the word, because you like went through the phases of a deer hunter that takes some people a lifetime, sometimes 10 years, 5 years, to progress from, hey, I'm gonna use a ladder stand, now I'm gonna go mobile, I'm gonna, bait, all that kind of stuff. And then, to a bow, all within one season. And again, if you can't, if you're not watching this, the bucks that he's talking about, 90% of us would, jump up and down to be able to shoot. And so that first year to harvest those bucks is pretty impressive. So how did your 2022 season go? So now you're committed to this bow hunting thing. And are you hunting with both? Are you hunting bow and gun then the next year?
After that, never picked up the gun again.
Same. I
I,
just use a bow. Yeah.
like when you said in the very beginning, it's like you had known me because what you said about going all in, I'm in. Like
Yeah.
I'm either doing it to the best of my abilities or I'm not touching it at all, and that's just my personality. That's kind of the way it is. And then it's and my job does have a lot to do with that. Even like when it comes to looking for stands, welder, fabricator background, all the prototype and design. I picked the stand solely based on what a lot of people wouldn't, because I
Mhm.
didn't know anybody. I didn't have mentors. What I looked at was USA materials. I looked at billet was cut from, off of a water jet and put together in America. It wasn't sand castings. It wasn't, cheaper materials. And I had no idea that the people who actually built the stands were actually like killers.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
no idea. And I picked it solely off just the quality of it. And I could see the quality of it just from what I do for a living. I run water jet, CNC machines, welders, plasma tables, just everything. So I know like what went into making that, and that's how they got it that lightweight. And so honestly, that helped me progress quickly in that aspect, as far as not going through other stuff that I didn't quite like. And I picked up, a few of their older stands at first, and I'm like, they're kind of heavy. They're better suited for like, semi-permanent, locations and
Hmm.
stuff. And then so that was 2020, and then 2021 just opened the season up because I'm a new bow hunter and just killed every doe I could legally, just every single one I could get in range. I was just stacking them up,
If you're
and
new
then
to hunting, everybody do that. Like, there's a podcast coming out tomorrow with Ryan Glitsky and on the dojo, and I've released a clip today, and he says killers kill. like go out and shoot animals, shoot these deer, if you want to get to that next level. And so I think that's amazing, man. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to point that out. Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
what you need to be doing.
And I was trying a bunch of different stuff. Um, at this point, 2020, I was kind of completely on my own. 2021, I started listening to a lot of podcasts and listening to a lot of people. 2021 was a learning year for me. I bogged myself down with worrying about a lot of stuff I shouldn't, and then had a lot of lessons learned that year, and then moved forward. I still end up harvesting 2 bucks with a bow, 4 does with a bow, and was after it pretty hard still. But that was a big learning year for me. I I kind of got bogged down being a perfectionist. I tried to, at first, I think I do what everybody does and try to listen to a podcast or talk to somebody and say, you should look for this topo line and you should find this wind and then you'll find a deer there. And I found out that everybody that I talked to, um, it was experience that they had, and that's what I didn't.
Mhm.
And that's why they were able to do what they was done. And I went to the Mobile Hunter Roadshow that year and met a guy named Nathan Killen,
Yeah, yeah.
and I started talking to him, and it clicked because he was telling me he was like, Ryan, I could look at a map and pretty much show you, if you have a 300-acre piece, I can pretty much show you where you're going to kill your bucks at. And my mind was like, and how do I get there? Like, how do I do that? And then he looked at me and he was like, it comes with experience. And when he said it, I don't know why, but it registered with me so well. And I was like, yeah, there's no shortcut to this. There's no easy pill. There's no gear that I can buy. There's no special bow that I can have or special kind of camouflage I can wear. This is going to be experience. And then so after I registered that, I took that in the woods and I stopped worrying about all the stuff I could not control, and I worried about what I could control. I could control my gear. I could be good at it. I could control shooting my bow. Um, but there was that whole next year, I didn't even look at wind one time. I was bogged down. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the thermals and everything everybody's talking about. And and I saw a lot of deer come in at me, blow, you know, stomp, act crazy, and take off running. And my mentality was, well, that was cool. It wasn't never like, well, oh man, I messed this up because the other option was sitting on the couch doing nothing. What I done was I just learned what that deer done. I learned how that deer came in, what, it was looking for, what triggered the alarm. Was it the ground scent? Was it the bungee cord I left one time laying on the ground? Walk right up to it and sniffed it when I was still trying to run a climber. All of those things when everybody else probably would have called it failures, I was learning and I am learning. And every time I go in the woods, like one of these bucks I shot, he come in and had me made, blew at me like crazy, jumped back 20 yards, stared at me, and I shot him and killed him, and he fell dead right there. And a lot of people probably would have never been in that situation because it was complete wrong wind. It was the complete wrong setup, but it worked out and it taught me a lot. And I learned that wind and thermals, I'm adding it in. Like if I would go into the woods instead of worrying about it beforehand, once I got to where I thought it was a good spot in the woods to hunt, I would pull out my maps and I would be just throwing milkweed everywhere. And then I was trying to understand it in the location I was at and then slowly building it. I thought at first that it was something I was going to be able to study and like take a course on wind and thermals. And then when I got done, I know everything about it. But the way my mind works is I'm going to always have to learn what draws, what's the creek doing, is the cliff going to pull the wind back over the backside? Just all of these things is all going to come with experience. And I just have been trying to put as much time in the woods as I can.
All right, that's our podcast, everybody. Just play that back over and over again. Like, dude, that was some serious wisdom that you've already have you developed at a very, really young part of your career here. You just spoke truth that needs to be said over and over again. I really like Really encourage everybody to listen to that and take that in. You said something earlier. You said you had a mentality of fail fast and move forward at work, right? It kind of sounds like you embrace that in your hunting journey here too. And I want to point that out that you would look at some of those failures and be like, man, that's awesome. Like I just learned that. Like I understand that. Having a positive attitude really, and really every killer that I talk to, that's what they possess too, is this positive attitude of, no, that's not a failure. I'm learning here and I'm going to use that. And that's going to go with me, forever now. So that's pretty amazing, man. That's awesome. So, were there any other things that you got caught up with? Because you said there were some things, and you said being perfectionist, but was there anything else that you were focusing on earlier in that year that you shouldn't have that maybe other people can avoid?
Um, the everybody saying wind and thermals is the most important thing. I got really bogged down on that one. A second thing is just trying to learn. It's trying to learn from this computer screen and trying to just like learn all the stuff in. I changed my mentality from I'm going to learn everything from the computer to I'm going to learn everything in the woods, but whitetails is still 365 for me. I'm going to listen to the podcast, but I don't listen to it as like, oh, he did this, I need to do that exact same thing. I'll just listen to it, and then when I'm in the woods and if I see that, then I can confirm it and say, oh yeah, that's what he was talking about. It makes sense now. It's kind of like I'm at the point now after 4 seasons. I am messaging a couple people that are older and have a lot more wisdom in the woods, and I hope I can get with them to do some scouting this summer. Because I am to the point now where I want to connect a few dots, and I feel like that's getting with a mentor is going to help me move even faster. But I'm glad that I didn't have a mentor until now, and it's kind of like um if you were trying something new, for example, like I don't even know anything about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or anything, but if you walked in there on day one and a black belt come up to you and he told you all of this, it's probably not going to make any sense to you. But if you go in there and you roll for 4 years and then he comes up to you and tells you some stuff, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can use that. I've been in that situation before. This can help me. So the first like the past 4 years, I'm kind of glad that it was by myself and it wasn't anybody. I didn't have anybody to steer me in the wrong direction as the right direction. I didn't have anybody putting bad habits. I was kind of like the little boy who cries wolf. I wasn't going to believe it unless I saw it. You could it got to the point to where you could say you can't hunt that spot on that wind. And I would say, okay, I'm gonna hunt it on the wrong wind on purpose now to see if you know what you're talking about. And then if I saw a deer, I was like, well, the thermals just overtook the wind. So how did you know, how would you have known that that was happening there? Those are things that I was learning. So don't get bogged down on trying to learn everything through the computer screen or what other people say. Um, and when it comes to the gear, I did the same thing. I listened to a lot of people, read a lot of reviews, and then what it came down to is what do I like? What works for Ryan? What can I be efficient with? And what works for me. Um, I've even ran across some people that's asked me about a piece of gear, and then they say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get that soon." And then I'll go on Facebook, and that night they commented and was recommending the gear that I know that they don't even own. And I'm like, "Well, how many people are doing that?" I started thinking, I'm like, "Well, that could be misleading." Like, so buy it. I know that, and you talked about this earlier with cars and money. I was kind of blessed with that aspect because I looked at, when you're looking at a $20,000 supercharger and an $8,000 set of beadlock wheels, it's different when I start hunting and I say, well, man, I can shoot the same bow Levi Morgan shoots for $1,300. Like, oh yeah, that's a deal. Let's sign me up. So I did go through a lot of gear, but the whole fell fast. Like, I bought it, I tried it. If I liked it, I moved forward. And the last thing that I would say was pushed to public land. Um, with me coming in the game late, all my friends that have been hunting ever since we were in high school, that that puts them about, in my mind, I was 10 years behind. And so I'm like, well, what do I do? And they were invested in clubs, box stands, ladder stands, um, splitting corn every year, um, plowing food plots and stuff like this. And I looked and said, okay, I can go down that route and jump in this, but what am I going to get out of it? The biggest buck that's been killed off this property is 120 inches, and um, they were friendships lost over that deer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I said, I have to go where the deer are at, and I have to hunt areas that are going to produce what I'm going to be happy with. And once I started killing a couple, 120s in South Carolina, I was like, I wanted to go to that next level. And then so once I started in the public land, it was a completely different game for me because I wasn't sitting and waiting anymore. I was chasing the deer, and I
Hmm.
was learning to actually become a hunter. And for me, the adventure part of it was very, that's what I like to. Um, growing up in the South, land is very, very precious. And we were always taught, if we crossed the neighbor's property, we were in trouble, and like big trouble. And so like once I found out that there's millions of acres that I can just stomp around all I want to, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, man, I was on Onyx and I was looking, I was like, oh, I can go here, I can go here, all these other places. And then so I just was like, man, out of state tax, $200 to $500 sounds a lot cheaper than that lease. Sounds a lot cheaper than all that corn they're buying and everything else. And then I don't have to fool with them people, and I can go do whatever I want, how I want. And then so that led scrape rub lines, because private land, I really wasn't even looking for that stuff. I was just
Yeah.
looking for, and looking back now, it's pinch points, but I didn't know that at the time. But I wasn't looking for tracks, no scrape, nothing. And then so once I started that, the learning curve went way up because I was in the middle of Ohio trying to figure out all of this stuff together. You know what I mean? And so that's what I've done, and that's what I would definitely recommend for somebody just starting out.
That's awesome, man. I love it. I love it. So when did you go out Ohio? What year was that?
That was the first year I went was 2022.
Okay. What brought you to Ohio? Why
So
there?
so I wanted to start hunting, and I wanted to go where bigger deer was at. But at this point, I didn't know anything about, like, do I check in before every time I go on public land? Do I have to park in a certain parking lot? I mean, it sounds dumb, and I know a lot of people that are listening are going to be experienced hunters, but coming from somebody that started from absolutely no experience, I didn't even know if you could park on the side of the road. You know what I mean? Like that was a question I had, like, is there designated parking spots? And I had all of these questions on how do I get this done. So I went through my Facebook feed and I was looking, and there was a guy I went to high school with, and I was like, man, I was like, this guy's going to Ohio to go hunting. I was like, I'm gonna tag along. So I messaged him and I was like, hey man, can I come hunting? And he was like, let me get back to you. And he messaged me back like a couple of days later and was like, look, man, we're going, we're serious hunters. We like, and I was like, I'm game. And it was funny because they thought I was mad at them at first because um they had a spot that they wanted to go, and I just left and got in the truck and went completely somewhere else and started scouting. And they were almost asking, "Oh, you don't want to hunt with us?" And I was like, "Nah, I need to learn this for myself." And they, at first, they took it as like, "Oh, you don't want to hunt with us," And I was like, "No," I was like, "I don't need to go where you're at and you just tell me this is a good spot, sit here," because I'm not gonna learn anything from that. So I went in a in a spot that no one else would hunt because of terrain. And man, it whooped me the first year, like up and down those hills. I was not used to that. And but I put in 10 solid days, and I let about 120, 100, probably 125-inch buck walk right in front of me, and I videoed him. And they were mind blown. They were like, "This is the first time you come out of state. Why in the world would you do that?" And I was like, I killed those at home. I was like, I wanted something else. And at that time, I thought that all the deer were just huge up there. I was like, why would I shoot this buck? We got those at home. I heard all the deer up here are big. Well, then you start putting in some time, you're like, well, that's still pretty rare to see that come by you. You know what I mean? And so then you have a little bit different perspective, but every bit of that, like um the even some of the places that I wanted to go hunt and they would require a hang tag and you had to check in. And there was a bunch of these rules that I was trying to learn and figure out and then go forward. So I tagged along that first year. And that was the only reason. I was looking for somebody to kind of show me the ropes and get me started. And I kind of went on my way after that.
So did you go to Ohio again then?
hmm
Yep. So that's the
So
following year. Is that 2023 then?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
2023. So that was the first out of state hunt. And then the next year, um, I put out some cameras. I had 5 acres to hunt at home, and that was it. My guy at work said, "Hey, man, there's 5 acres," and I knew there were good deer in the area, because there's people I went to high school with that have 1,200 acres across the street. And I was like, I'm gonna show these people that, and they all hunted with rifles. And I was like, I'm gonna show them that I can get a bow, and with 5 acres, that with enough time and patience, I can kill a deer off this property, because they wouldn't let me hunt the land with them. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna get on this 5 acres, and that was the first year I killed a targeted buck. I had a very mature, crazy messed up rack deer. He didn't score very much. He had an extra beam. He ended up breaking off, but he was 200 about 208 pounds, and for the South Carolina area,
Yeah.
that's a very impressive deer. And he was probably about 4.5 years old. And I specifically set out to target. That was the very first buck. I was like, I got a picture of him. I got him in an area. There was some smaller eights. It was probably scored a little bit better, but they wasn't near the mature. And I was like, I want to try to get this done. Targeted that deer, got that deer killed, and then had a really good feeling going to Ohio. And then 2023, I shot this buck, and he scored 163.
Yeah.
Um, so
He's a beast, man. Tell us about that hunt.
okay, so 10 days of suck, 10 days of absolutely nothing, running around, trying to hunt this area, and then coming back and then asking my friends that I was hunting with. I was like, hey man, that area that y'all are in over there, y'all mind if I like tag along? I'm not seeing nothing over here. And they were like, well, um, somebody was baiting, and
Mm.
we called the game warden, and he told us to kind of stay out of the area. So then they kind of scattered. And then so now we're all scattered on a new piece. We're just at this point we're literally riding around the roads looking for does because we knew the rut was going on. I was riding a bunch of roads and I saw a bunch of does crossing. And so I started hunting in this area. And then my other friend was hunting in a area kind of close to there, and then the game warden called and said, "Hey, y'all spots are back open." So they went back to their honey hole, what they have been hunting for 3 years straight. And then so I started chasing these does around because I was at this point, it's been 10 days. I was just trying to see deer at this point. And I set up on a ridge and I saw about 140-inch 8 point. And at this point, this is the biggest deer I've ever seen on the hoof. And my nerves are tore up, and he is about 85 yards away. And I just watch him for about 20 minutes. And so I see where the area he's coming from. And I go back and I tell my friends, I'm like, I'm going to try to back up and get back there where he came from. And so I went ahead and preset my stand that evening. I preset it because I knew where I was going to go anyway. And then so came back and hung in that stand, slipped in there early the next morning, and still not a look. But I saw 6 point and another deer, and I was like, man, I'm close, but I'm just not seeing it. So we had one more day left. No one else is hunting because everybody's just had a horrible, you know what I mean? Or they've shot a deer or they're just done. The weather was
Mhm.
bad. And I was like, I'm gonna try it one more time. And so I still had my stand in the woods. tucked away. And the other spot that I was hunting before I moved here, where I hunted all earlier week, I had to leave like really early because it took a drive. I forgot to set my alarm clock back. So when my alarm went off, I was like, man, I could probably sleep for another hour. But I was like, I'm up. It's the last day. I'm just gonna go ahead and go in. So I ended up going super early, which I hadn't been doing. And I was able to ease in very quietly because it was pre-hung, sat there, and it started getting really cold. And I was like, oh, this is good. We haven't had any weather like this. And my mentality changed. I would be doing a disservice to the story if I didn't put this in here. And I'm looking at the bow. I'm looking at, I have on Sitka camouflage. I'm sitting in a lone wolf stand. I'm looking at a Matthews bow. I'm out of state. I got good health. I'm like, man, this 10 days has been horrible, but man, it could have been a lot worse. I was like, I'm blessed to be here. I'm blessed to be doing this, and I'm blessed to be doing what I love. And I've learned a lot more once again. And I said a quick prayer when I got up in the stand and thanking him for the trip and everything. And then I heard a snort wheeze for the first time in my life. And it wasn't just one time. He done it 8 times back to back to back. And my nerves is shot. It's still dark. I've got my bow. I'm just like standing around in my stand. Like, what do I do? Um, and it's sleeting. So here comes the sleet, here comes the rain. And right at daylight, that same 6 point come running up out. And I was like, I know that was not you. Like I haven't been doing this long, but I know that was not you making all that racket down there. And I looked and some does had started feeding up a draw. And I heard the noise from a bottom. And I was on about the upper 1/3 of a ridge and heard all the commotion in the bottom. And then I looked and I saw the deer and but he was about 120 yards away. But looking back, it I didn't sit there and just keep my binos on him and stare. As soon as I picked it up, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a shooter buck," and I didn't even look at him no more with my binos. I had my bow in my hand complete the entire time, and I watched him for a little bit with just a naked eye seeing him, but I really couldn't tell how big he was from that far away. I just saw a tall and tight rack, um, and I was like, "Man, what do I do? Like, it's the last day. Do I get him to come over here?" And I wasn't very comfortable with a grunt call, so I started softly and he paid it no attention. And then I got loud and he still paid it no attention. And I was like, well, this isn't helping me or it isn't hurting or anything. It's not doing anything. And then the doe tried to get away. And so I had positioned myself where they could not go any farther this way. So they had to come back towards me. So the doe took off running. And when she took off running, he come by and literally hollered almost at the top of my lungs. And then when he slid, his front feet just locked up. And as soon as he did, there was a bunch of stuff that went through my mind. I was like, I had to range him. I'm already at full draw. We're going to go for 35 yards, send it. Ended up being a perfect shot. He fell over 40 yards in front of me, no drag job required or nothing. And I was sitting there and I was just shaking. I was like, man, like all that happened that quick. And but if I don't think if I had a blew that grunt call, I think I would have tried to stop him with a grunt.
Hmm.
But seeing how that I'd already tried the grunt call a lot, I knew that that was not going to stop him or he wasn't going to care about it at all. So I'm glad that I'd done that and tried that, because if I would have just been quiet the whole time when he come running by, I would have probably just picked up the grunt call and tried to get him. But at that point, I just hollered. I was laughing at my friends. I was telling them I was like, man, I saw the white in his eyeballs when I hollered. I said I think he knew it was done deal right then. But we had trail camera pictures of that deer 2 years ago, but we didn't have any that year. And
Yeah,
it was over 600 yards away in a completely different spot. And he was just hot after some does.
man, there's so much to take away from that story for real. There's the fact that you were driving around looking for does, right? Trying to find the deer to get into the deer. I think that's a fantastic tactic. Especially if you because the rut can happen on the next ridge and not on the ridge that you're on. And so but you had the patience too. You're not moving too early. You're playing it out for a little while. And then to get in the cars and start driving around trying to find the action, I think is a brilliant move. Let me ask you a question. So from where you killed this buck, could you see your stand prior to moving? Because you said you made a move, right? Like you were sitting one day, you saw a 140-inch and you moved. How far was that move?
By the crow flies, it was probably only about 120 yards, but you could not see them visually from one or the other. I was on this side of the ridge,
Yep,
and I went to a perpendicular ridge on the opposite side.
yep. So if you didn't make that move,
No,
you're not in the game. You're not gonna see this buck.
not at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. Another thing that people I think can really take away is that, you know, taking in that data as it's occurring right in front of you and then making a judgment call, and making that move. Again, a little bit of that fail fast and move forward mentality, right in action right there. Um, Man, that's pretty awesome, man. That's such a great story. So much. I just got to commend you on again the wisdom that you're using just in that hunt right there, with making these moves, the mentality shift there at the end, realizing your blessings and keeping a good attitude. Probably kept you ready and in the stand, and that's awesome too. So you kill a mid 160s. What's up for you now, man? What are you gonna do?
So that really lit the fire under me. I was telling my friends, when I came back home and showcased that caliber of deer back in my hometown, I looked up the South Carolina record book, and I'm from what I saw, I'm not 100% correct on this, just but from what I saw, I'm pretty sure I was looking at the right documents. There had only been 28 bucks in the state of South Carolina and ever that were killed that were larger than that buck. And so I was like, South Carolina's not going to do it for me. It's just not. And also put in perspective, like don't don't try to make it something it's not. Like now, I used to wish these deer. My friends will text me and they'll be in the woods, in South Carolina, and they're like, "Man, I'm looking for that 160 so I can catch up to you." And I just say LOL, but in my mind, I'm like, "You're never gonna find him. Like he's not there. Like he's not going to be there. You're never gonna find him, where you're hunting." And I used to, when I hunted South Carolina, and I saw all these TVs or the deers that killed on TVs and all these big bucks taken, I would almost wish them in my head
Hmm.
for the areas that I was hunting, and I would just maybe, just maybe they'll come out, maybe they'll come out. And then I went up at that Mobile Hunter Roadshow. I went and talked to Cody afterwards, and I was pre-ordering. I don't remember, it was like a waist belt or something from him, and I was telling him where I lived, and I was telling him what I was wanting to do. And I said, I'm looking to get out of South Carolina and I'm looking to go somewhere. And if you had 3 or 4 states, which areas would you look at? And he said, well, the first thing is you done right by recognizing that you have to move. Same way as mobile hunting, in my opinion, that's part of it. Like if I'm not where I need to be in South Carolina, to me, mobile hunting is just as much part of it as getting in my truck and leaving. That's pretty mobile in my opinion, and going to the areas where I'm going to kill good deer at, that I'm going to, be happy with. Um, so, he was, telling me some hot spots and some areas and, some states. And so I just started circling those states. And then the next year, I think I hunted 4 different states.
Damn.
I mean, just like wide open. And run into a bunch of mess, and um, a lot of failures, and a lot of things learned. And then this year, um, this past year, it was I took 33 days off work in a row. I didn't take one vacation day. I had 5 weeks vacation, and I didn't take one day all year long. And I told my boss at the beginning of the year, if I had everything done, I was going to take all of November off, and the first part or the last week of October, and all of November, because we had Thanksgiving in there. We were already off, for 3 or 4 days. And so I got in my truck and I took off, and I lived out of the back of my truck and hunted 3 different states, scouted 4 states, and hunted 3 states. And just I will say that that's the longest I've ever been away from work. And I'm 30 this year, and I've been working since I was 16, in a full-time position. And that's the longest I'd ever been away, and that was the first. I felt like it was honestly the first vacation I've ever had. It was like it's always if you take a couple of days off and you go to Gatlinburg or wherever, you're coming right back. But for the first time, I was like I'd forgot about after like 3 weeks, I fully got work off my mind. I was like I'm just out here just reading sign and where do I go next and just tearing off and continuing on. But that killing that big buck has told me, man, those are things I got to chase in different states.
Yeah, I love what you said about your mentality about just part of the mobile game is actually going to where the Bucks are. If that's another state, that's definitely how I think as well. And not to say you can't do it in your own state, set the right expectations, right? But your truck, I mentioned it earlier. To me, my truck is one of the most like vital pieces of equipment I have, and meaning the way that it's set up. So mine is not even close to as I don't know what to call it, like efficient or as cool as
Mhm.
yours. I thought it was really. It kind of you kind of knocked me down a little bit. I'm
Oh
feeling,
no, 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 no.
but I've got a really comfortable bed in the back. It's set up to be super comfortable. I can move at a moment's notice. I don't have to pack up anything. Everything's just there, and I love that because sometimes I'll go to a state and where I thought was going to be, money isn't, or the pressure's through the roof, and it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not stuck. I don't feel down. I just jump in the car or in the truck and I'm moving to the next campsite and to the next piece of public. So did I the back of your truck, it what's all set up in that bed, man? Because it's wired up for a bunch of stuff. What do you got going on?
So again, my job kind of helped me out with that. I like I said, I'm all in. If I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it all in. So um I the, you probably and a lot of people probably missed the pop-up camper. So the first year I was like, I got to get mobile. What do I do? Well, I buy a pop-up camper. So then I hook up the pop-up camper and I take off to Kentucky in the early season and it's scorching hot and I'm pulling this thing around and it's raining and I'm trying to pack this thing up while it's raining. Now everything inside of it's wet and I'm trying to set it up and I looked on all of these YouTube. I spent all summer long on YouTube videos of like pop-up campers. And then once I pull up to the campsite, it like clicked. I was like, well, I wasted the whole summer. Like, I'm not here to camp. I'm not here to have a good time. I'm not here to cook food. I'm not here to sit around a campfire and tell stories. I am here to kill a deer and I'm here to leave. So I'm hunting all day long from daylight to dark, no matter where I'm at or what time of year it is, because I just feel like I can't get nothing done back at the campsite. Hopefully one year, in 10 or 15 years when I have more knowledge, I can piece together more important things, you know what I mean? And pick specific times to hunt. But right now, five five seasons, I'm gonna spend every time I can in the woods. So I came back home and I told my dad and my my wife was kind of upset. She was like, "You spent all summer working on that thing," and because I told her it'll probably be a dual purpose, maybe me and you can use it, together. And then I came home and I was like, "I'm selling this thing. I'm so mad at this thing." I was like, "It's not efficient at all." And so that pushed me towards. I was like, "Well, I just need a place to lay down." I was like, "I just need a comfortable place to sleep," and so the batteries and all that, I went down a rabbit hole on do I do I park on the side of the road? Do I try to run power? Because heat, obviously, we're hunting in these areas and it's cold. Do I try to, run heat? Heat is, 1,000 watts as you're going to be pulling. You're going to drain some batteries, so you're going to have a generator or some other thing, or you run a diesel heater and I was terrified of putting
Mhm.
I have a diesel truck and I know what diesel fuel smells like. I've been around farm equipment my whole life and you get it on your hands, you're gonna smell it for the rest of the day. And I was terrified of putting that in my truck. And I was like, man, I'll spill it. I'll drive all the way, up north somewhere and I'll open the back of my truck up and it's all gonna smell like diesel fuel. And I was like, I'm just and I thought about running a line from the tank and and I was just got nervous. So I started like researching on what to do. And then I found out that, the national forest that I was hunting, they have camping in some areas. And for me, it was, I may be 45 minutes from where I want to hunt, but it was more important to me to have a campsite with power. So I pay for the primitive camping and I pay for the one with power. It normally is anywhere from like 22 to $32 a night. And we'll have a plug to my truck. And when I get to where I'm going, I plug it up and it runs my heater. I do have a lithium battery in there for the lights and my refrigerator. So my refrigerator will run off of that battery for 48 hours straight. But all night when I'm sleeping, it will completely recharge the battery, so it'll be good to go. Um, and phone chargers, and other things like that that, requires power. But the wiring's probably overcomplicated for what it is because I got the buses and fuses and um, the shunts for the display, so I know exactly how much battery life I have. And there's a couple other things, lights and stuff that I probably didn't need, but I'm like, well, I'm here, I might as well do it. You know what I mean? Um, but that's worked out good for me. There's been a time where I have wanted a generator because I've had to sleep in Bucky's parking lot and it was freezing cold and I just could not drive anymore, um driving, 15 hours with one way is where I was hunting this
Hmm.
past year from my house. And I'm like, man, so I'm thinking about the summer. I don't know about just maybe buying me a Honda generator and throwing it on my rack if I have to pull over and sleep for emergencies. But a shower and power is very important to me for reset. And that's another thing. Like, I found out that up north that all the campsites shut their water off after November. A lot of them do. So everyone I was calling was like, "Well, we're not going to have water while you're hunting." And I was like, man, that's going to be a big bummer. Like 30 days, I'm not going to be able to take a shower, like cold showers and stuff. So then I started calling, asking different questions. I was like, hey, will you have campsite at your main house? And then a couple of them said, yes, we will keep 2 showers at our main house. So then I just got a parking spot close to the main house. All the other showers are closed off, but the main facility itself, I was able to find a couple of those. And then they ended up working out deals with me because they're like, we don't have a lot of, campers in November, it's off season. And I was getting some really good campsites for $20 a night with showers completely to myself. And I was driving 45 minutes, but for me it was worth it to have that reset, the hot shower, the power. I'll get up and drive 45 minutes before I sleep in a Walmart parking lot with none of those amenities.
Yeah, dude, I do the same thing. Mine's a pretty simple, I've got a plug that actually I just drilled a hole into my cap, and I bought this plug off of Amazon that slides right in there. And so I plug in from the outside, which is funny because I drove off with the with the cord last time.
Okay.
I cannot find it either. It must have drove
Oh man.
down the road forever. But um, and then I plug in. I've got a strip, and I plug in all my different phone chargers, whatnot. I got LED lighting that runs on small lithium batteries, just like the double A's or whatever. I've had them for years. They work still, and it's just kind of touch and then they turn on. And that works good for me. I do the same thing. I find a campsite that has electric. I'll drive half hour, 45 minutes if I have to. And I've got a shower. The other thing I did too is I have a propane shower. So I actually, let me just be super clear. I don't own it. I borrow it from my neighbor because he has it
Hmm.
and he lets
Yep.
me use it every time. So I just hook it up to a propane tank and then it heats up the water, and then I'm good if I need to have a shower on my own. So, man, that's awesome. I love what you're doing with that stuff, man. That's so cool. We're gonna have some more conversation around that. This podcast flew, man. We've been talking for about an hour,
Oh
and
wow.
and we just kind of generalized some of it. I've got to have you back on because I want to talk more tactics and just more of what you're learning. There's so much in this podcast for guys who either have been stuck and haven't been able to get to that threshold. I think 110, 120 is that threshold where you can, you really start making it click, and you're getting bucks that, you want to put on your wall. You can put any buck on your wall. I've got So you can't see it right now, but I got my first buck up there, and he's a tiny one. Um, but that 120, I think everybody's kind of like wanting to get to, and then you start to build off of that. There's so much that you said today that people need to listen to. I just want to recap a couple of those things really quick. The fail fast and move forward is, I think, the best technique to learning. Get out there. Don't try to learn it all first on the screen, like you were saying. Get out there and fail fast and move forward and learn from it. Um, this what I would say controlled aggression, looking at the data, watching things happen in front of you, making that move, not being afraid to get up and move your gear and go after those bucks is another thing. You learning on your own, I think, is a fantastic idea. You sounded a lot like I've heard Andy May talk. He didn't have anybody to mentor him, and which meant he didn't pick up any bad habits. He was just out there learning and trying to figure out what works and only doing what works. So that was very reminiscent. Spending the amount of time in the woods that you're doing, that's the only way to learn. You said that earlier, like it's not the gadgets, it's not this, it's not that. It's me going out there and learning it, and there's no other way around it. You are a straight killer. And I'm not saying that just because of the bucks that you have behind you. It's your mentality, it's your approach. We are going to hear podcasts from you for years to come, because a guy who goes at it the way that you go at it is going to keep killing big deer. I mean, that's just what it's going to be. So we're going to wrap this up. Is there anything you want to share to the listeners before we go?
Um, and there's a whole lot, but if I could sum up, a few things, kind of grasp is control what you can control, and don't try to control everything you cannot control. You can control practicing in the summer with your mobile system. I've got friends that hunt with summit climbers that are killers. I mean, it's the big, it looks like a recliner when they're walking through the woods, and they are killers, man. They will get after it. It doesn't matter what it is you learn it and you be efficient with it. And then, your weapon, whether you're shooting a rifle or, a bow, traditional, you can control that. You can spend a lot of time, you can practice, and, you can control those things. Um, when someone walks up you and on public land, you can't control that. I don't get mad at that. In fact, if I look and I'm like, man, this guy's crazy if he's back here, where I'm at, or I'm like, what if he drove all the way up here? What if he drove 5 hours? If he got in his truck and drove 5, 6 hours, pulled off on the side of the road. He didn't probably mean to blow my hunt out. He's working as hard as I am. I never looked at any of those things that were out of my control as a negative, and I never fed that back to myself as a negative. I tried to learn off every bit of that. And that being said, I've learned to study people just as much as I have deer with hunting public land. And the the learning maps, not as um every detail about it. Just if you want to hunt an area, click on that area, learn about that area. Like I said earlier, you may have to have a hang tag there. It may be certain days. That's one thing that's crazy to me is I've learned is like there's so many different rules and so many different regulations, and they may border each other and they have completely different rules. So you can control doing all that in the off season. You can find out where you want to hunt, get all your ducks in a row, get every bit of that. But once you step out in the woods, just enjoy the process. And my mom's got this corny sign from Hobby Lobby or something. And it was like, don't get too caught up, on the destination that you missed a journey. And, that's one thing that I kind of found out with hunting is the first thing that I enjoyed the journey, every bit of it. Even with cars, it was bumps. It was like, man, this is stupid, and slinging wrenches or being upset. But the entire process of the scouting, the getting ready, I thoroughly enjoy every bit of it. And I try to take it all in and learn as much as I can. Be a sponge, soak it all up, learn everything you can, and move forward.
Man, that is so awesome. Ryan, I'm gonna have you back on for sure here. I could probably have you on 2, 3 more times. There's so much that you said that I want to unpack, and I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight. Um, everybody, go look them up on social media. Again, can you tell us where you're at, or what your handles are?
Facebook is Ryan Snow, And then Instagram is last name first with an extra W. So it's Snow with an extra W underscore Ryan. And yeah, that's all. I don't have a YouTube or anything else.
All right, awesome, man. So thanks a lot again for coming on. Thanks for listening, everybody. We're going to be back next week, Wednesday, with another Whitetail Master. So have a good one. Thanks.